Welcome back to my Legends Expanded Universe chronological timeline rating, where I go through my expanded universe timeline in my chronological order and rank each and every individual piece of media on a 10-point scale. Today I have War of the Jedi and the Legends of Lettow, Arden Lin Testimony. This is by Jason Fry. It was published in 2012. It takes place in 24,000 BBY. It is a short story that was published by Del Rey, and it is found in The Essential Guide to Warfare. It's found on pages 15 to it's on page 15 to 18. So it's quite long. It's three and a half pages long. And it's quite an important story because it's a really, really cool connection this short story has. It tells the backstory to a main character who appears in the Star Wars Street Fighter-inspired video game for the PlayStation that was called Masters of Terras Kasi. Now, there's a character in that called Arden Lin, and this tells her backstory. But that game is set 25,000 years later in the Imperial era. So how does she get there? Well, it explains in the opening of this story that where the story comes from is after she wakes up from stasis from 25,000 years. She's there with 3 Inquisitors, including Inquisitor Tremaine, who's a very important Inquisitor, who appears in a lot of media during the Imperial era. And she manages to kill one Inquisitor, killer, and she's captured by the others. And in the debriefing, that's where we get this story. Arden Lin mentions the Jedi and talks about them, and she has a real disdain for them. She talks about them as weak servants of Ashla who didn't realize that their eyes could be open and they could understand Bogan. So this story flawlessly connects to Dawn of the Jedi comics with the Ashla and Bogan principle. It also mentions that during this time, I'm assuming the Force Saber technology must have been lost, because they're back to using katana blades again that they imbue with the Force. That gives them a distinctive color. So she talks about the blades that they use at this time, which is quite interesting. And she mentions meeting Zendor at the Jedi Academy and how he studied all aspects of the Force, although his people called the Force the Breath. So it's always interesting to hear how different cultures call the Force different things. So Zendor was a master of the Breath, but Zendor wanted to learn of all of the aspects of the Force, including aspects from the Chatos Academy, the Dai Bendu, the Keldor Sages, that comes up in Fate of the Jedi, the Bogan, the Kashimir, the Palawa, and the Way of the Dark and the Proctorate of the Hidden. So he wanted to learn all Force powers, similar to Jason Solo does in Darkness. He wants to hear all different aspects of the Force, which made him dangerous, see, because he had these views of the Force should be less rigid and held together by rules and stuff. We should not be constrained in our usage of the Force. We should be able to flow freely with it. A very interesting concept, something that lots of villains and heroes alike have felt over the years of the Star Wars galaxy. So she mentions how Zendor forms the Legions of Lettow, as they become known, and Arden mentions joining, and, they're going to study all aspects of the Force. And they believe that, that their mission is okay, it's right. They think that the Jedi will leave them alone, but the Jedi don't leave them alone. The Jedi pursue them because they see this as a threat, because obviously it is a threat to their way of teaching their theology. So the Jedi want it, ended. So they form armies against Zendor, and to spare the galaxy bloodshed and pain, they tried to stop the war in the early stages. They didn't want this to get out of hand. The Legions of Lettow didn't want lots of casualties, as wars between Force users always leave many, many innocents dead. So the Legions of Lettow, this first dark army before the Sith, who just followed all aspects of the Force and not only the light, they weren't all bad. We're seeing from their perspective. In the Danzigoro Potsdata card, we heard from the Jedi perspective and how the Legions of Lettow were a danger and they were terrible. But realistically, many Jedi joined the Legions of Lettow, as established in that data card by Dan Zagora Potts a couple reviews back. Many Jedi willingly joined. So, there's got to be something to it that drew Jedi there. And now we're seeing from their perspective. And from their perspective, they're not villains. I think even Sith would admit that some of the stuff they do is heinous. They just don't care. But inevitably, the war spirals out of control between the Jedi and the Legions of Lettow. Chandrila and Brental, Coruscant and Metalos, Coralag, they fight. Then it mentions how Zendor dies at Culamus, which we know from the Dan Zagora Potts data card. He was pursued by Audrasta Pine, who has the coolest nickname of all time. Audrasta Pina, not Pine, Pina. Audrasta Pina, who's known as the Green Blade. If that isn't the coolest name ever, it's got to be. So, Arden Lyn, it's hinted that maybe there was some romance involved between Arden Lyn and Zendor, and she's very sad that she wasn't at Columbus. She would have rather died with him, or at least been there to try to help him overcome the Jedi. But she wasn't at Columbus for whatever reason, and Zendor's death, it had a bad effect on her. And she wasn't there when the Jedi closed in at Columbus, and Dan Zagora Potts died there, and Zendor did. But he was a good man in her mind. She remembered Zendor fondly. But Pina's legion still pursued her. The Green Blade, that's just such a cool name. So Pina continued to advance on Arden Lyn. And the odds were highly against Arden Lyn and any legions of Lettow that survived Zendor's death, because they used a battle meld. So this is another mention of forced battle meditation, which Tashirayo used, which Oppo Rancisis used, which Jason, Jaina, and Anakin use. So they use a battle meditation to fight as one. So it removes their individuality and means they fight as one. Just an overwhelming force that the legions of Lettow couldn't really stand against the Jedi, as Audrasta Pina, the Green Blade, led them forward. And they came to Lettow, where they fell back. The legions of Lettow fall back to Lettow, a planet themselves, to try to survive from the Green Blade. And the Arden Lyn and them are really struggling because they're without not only Zendor, but their mightiest warriors, Sethul Asiej and Tun Bohoi, both fell with Zendor at Columbus. So falling back to Lettow is one of the only things they can do. And still, the Green Blade, Audrasta Pina, came to kill them. The Jedi sometimes did what they felt was necessary, and sometimes that's pretty cruel, what the Jedi were forced to do or decided to do. At Lettow, they were able to hold off Pina's forces just long enough that a couple of them could slip past Republic borders, and Arden Lyn fled to Kittle Fard, and she would go along secret hyperspace routes that Zendor had discovered, but Green Blade chased her. The Green Blade just chased her down. He couldn't let any Legions of Lettow followers survive. He followed her to Urkala, and she had a talisman with her that was supposed to give her strength that had been Zendor's, and so she was still followed, and she reflects that her love of Zendor, kept her going during this time, but Pina kept chasing her through the stars, chasing her for the talisman, who's to say, maybe for both. And finally, Audrasta Pina caught up to her, and they fought in battle. But even as she killed him and his life force ebbed away, he used a spell on her that, kept her entrapped, almost in her own mind, and for centuries. And when she wakes up, she reflects that she's out of time. She really wishes that she had simply been killed by the Green Blade, but instead, it was a worse torment, staying in stasis for 25,000 years, trapped with her thoughts, to only awaken to a strange galaxy where things are not how they had been. That's way later. But she also mentions that Zendor had actually met the Ones. What a crazy connection to the Clone Wars and the fate of the Jedi. Zendor himself had met the Ones. He'd traveled to a strange dead world where the Force was worshipped as a triad of beings: the daughter, the light side; the son, the dark; and the father was the Force itself, perhaps, she reflected. So interesting that there's a connection to the ones there. Very, very cool. What do I think about the story? Overall positives? Great background to the character of Arden Lynn. You really feel her pain. Other positives, you get the side of the Legions of Lettow, something it didn't focus on before. So it's really cool to get their side of the story, not just the Jedi side, but the side of the Legions themselves. Overall negatives, I'm a Jedi guy. I love the Jedi. And to see the green blade depicted as being somewhat bloodthirsty, I wasn't a big fan of that characterization for a Jedi to be so misguided like that. I didn't really, for his cool nickname, I didn't like the way the character was represented. Overall, great connection to lots of EU. The One's connection in there was brilliant. The connection to Masters of Terrascasi video game. Brilliant stuff. Super great positives. This story is a little dull at times, unengaging, a little bit slow, but overall, it was a really fun read. I would give it a 3 or 4. I would have to give it a 3 of 10. But there's room for improvement. It could go as high as a 3.5 on any given day. So this is an excellent read. If you want it read to you, check out Marcel, the Revanchist, on YouTube. He reads the story out flawlessly, not one slip up. His voice is that of an angel. So go over there, the link will be in the description, and listen to this story read to you. Then come back here and tell me what you thought of this story. I thought it was good at times, but there were some things that I had issues with.